Hello, everyone. We are thrilled to be presenting a timely program brought to you by the American Bar Association section of Civil Rights and Social Justice, entitled The Many Faces of Civil Rights and Social Justice Lawyers. This is the first panel in CRSJ's latest initiative, Civil Rights Boot Camp, which is a 2-day virtual summit that serves as a comprehensive resource for young lawyers, law students, public service attorneys, and advocates of all backgrounds. We hope that you will stay with us throughout the day as we have a stellar lineup. During today's program, we encourage you to ask questions of our panelists through the Q&A feature as opposed to the chat feature. Again, please share your questions through the Q&A feature. If you do not see the controls, please ensure that your screen is not idle. We will be monitoring the Q&A and will do our very best to address your questions, time permitting. We will also share a recording of this program with everyone who has registered, so please share it widely with your networks. Without further ado, we will go ahead and get started. I am Lacey Durham, and I have the wonderful privilege of being chair of the section of Civil Rights and Social Justice. I have an all-star group of friends with me today, including Lanita Baker, Robin Donaldson, Drusilla Ramey, and Lori Rifkin. You're going to hear so much about each of these individuals. And so I want to just jump right into it. And I want everyone to be able to share a little bit about how they got involved. Civil rights and social justice lawyering, of course, comes in many forms. Can each of you briefly describe your particular area of focus and how it fits into the broader landscape of civil rights law? And I'll kick it over and start with Robin first.
Hi, thank you for having me. So I'm the founder of Paths to Peace. We're a team of trauma-informed educators. There's yoga teachers, therapists, advocates, and we are a network who work with organizations and individuals around trauma-informed care. And for me, I always embraced civil rights and human rights in my life, just from my parents, grandparents. And when I went to law school, I knew I was going to be a non-traditional lawyer, and I started off after law school in contract law and international business and trade, and just did that for a few years. And then from there, I went into conflict resolution and mediation, and that was a common thread throughout my professional life. After that, in 2008, Barack Obama, I was recruited to be on staff for his campaign, and that led me to Florida. And it was kind of like the rest was history. I started working in political consulting and electoral politics, and working on healthcare and community building. And so after about 5 years between law and politics, I really understood how stressful these positions are. And but at the same time, you love what you do, you want to serve and help people, you want to use, all your knowledge, and it's very important, but it is a very stressful job. It can be. And even if you're not practicing and you're in other areas of civil rights. But that led me to understand more about mental health. So I started teaching yoga, went into the health and wellness area and studying trauma, and actually was a yoga teacher who was also an attorney, who started training people in and around trauma. And that led me into using trauma-informed care practices and using that to address conflict resolution. And eventually I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and just started working there with a lot of politicians and organizations, and working on mental health and trauma-informed care.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think what you'll see here is that there's so many different paths to the practice in so many different areas. Lori, would you mind going next and sharing a little bit about your background? And then we'll kick it over to Lanita and round out with Drew.
Sure. Thanks, Lacey. It's great to be here this morning. I'm Lori Rifkin. In my current position, I'm litigation director at the Impact Fund, which is based out of the Bay Area. And we are a nonprofit that supports using class action and other impact litigation to fight for social justice. We do it in a variety of ways. We do a lot of training and education of other lawyers in terms of how to bring these kinds of collective action and impact cases, as well as providing support to direct services attorneys. We actually provide grants to other folks doing class action and impact work, and then we have our own litigation docket, and that spans different social justice areas. I started after law school as a staff attorney at the ACLU of Connecticut. I was also a staff attorney at the ACLU of Southern California, focusing on women's rights and LGBT rights. I worked at a private civil rights law firm in San Francisco, where I mainly focused on the rights of incarcerated folks, doing class actions about the right to mental health care, medical care, due process, freedom from abuse. I then worked as an attorney at the Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, Special Litigation Section, where I worked on police abuse and juvenile justice issues. And then I started my own civil rights law firm in the Bay Area, where I did a variety of civil rights cases, both on behalf of individuals and class action work. And kind of representing folks from all walks of life across the forms of kind of discrimination and social justice, also doing a lot of work on behalf of folks who are incarcerated. And then I took this position as litigation director at the Impact Fund, and I've been there for about a year. So I have worked kind of the gamut of in the civil rights world, from government to private practice to nonprofit world.
Thank you for sharing. Lanita.
Yes, thank you. And I'm excited to be here with my fellow panelists today as well. My name is Lanita Baker. I am the managing partner for the Kentucky office of Baker and Westbrook. I'm also a professor of practice at the University of Louisville Brandeis School of Law, where one of my teaching areas is civil rights law. I also, so my focus for civil rights has been primarily on representing individuals whose violations or whose civil rights have been violated. But in doing that, because of my background, my full legal experience, and I'll go into that, I try to take each of those cases that I work on and make as much change through one case as I can. It's not just about the civil rights, their individual civil rights case. It is because my ethical obligations, but in working with those families to create and push for systemic change. In 2020, I had the honor of representing the family of Breonna Taylor. And while we were able to settle her civil rights claim within 6 months, which is virtually unheard of in a civil rights case, and we can talk about that if the time allows, but it's virtually unheard of that a civil rights case, civil case settled within 6 months. But in doing that, part of that settlement also included terms of police reform. So we negotiated with the mayor's office, with the city attorney's office, to that the police department would agree to specific areas of change. Also working with the Department of Justice prosecutors in their civil rights division. We recently had a consent decree, waiting on the judge to sign off on that, but we know how that may go or not go, but pushing for that consent decree, as well as criminal charges against the officers that were brought by the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. While that's the most nationally known case I've worked on, I've done a number of cases locally that have also pushed for departmental changes, whether it's within the Louisville Metro Police Department or the Metro Department of Correction. So it has been here in Louisville, Kentucky, but making as much change as I can with those, as well as from Breonna's case, we had several states, including our own, ban the use of no-knock warrants for police officers. So it's just important to me to not just take one case at a time and help that case, but how can I prevent future people from being harmed from the same scenario? So where did I get that, lobbying aspect within a single case? I began my legal career as a public defender. I went to law school to be a sports and entertainment lawyer. So, it didn't work out that way, but I've enjoyed every minute of my legal career. So I started my career as a public defender, did that for a couple of years before going into private criminal defense. But then I became a prosecutor, and I always get asked, like, people get confused because like you went kind of the opposite way. Normally people go from prosecutors to criminal defense. Well, I wanted to be that prosecutor that could impact change to, you know, what services can I provide to individuals so that I don't see them again, right? To really effectuate justice, the heart of what a prosecutor is supposed to do. And I've met many prosecutors that are in that vein, but then there are some that make it just so hard to change the system that needs to be changed. And thankfully, I worked for someone who allowed me to be the prosecutor that I envisioned being for my community. The office that I worked for also handled civil, they represented the city in various matters. So when I got tired of prosecuting after 6 years, I was like, hey, can I move to our civil side where I advised our Metro Council, so our Louisville Metro Council, which is our city's governing body, legislative arm. And so advising them, I saw the inner workings of how to push for legislative change and go from there, as well as representing the various agencies. Left there, went into private practice, which is where I began the individual civil rights cases, and I take those. Okay, I don't have my primary practice is personal injury, but I always say personal injury allows me the freedom to be able to take the civil rights cases that I feel strongly about, that I feel like if I take these, I can make a greater change. And then teaching now, and when we had our meet up earlier in the week, I told you all one of the greatest honors is one of the students who graduated last May called me recently, and he's taken probably 3 or 4 civil rights cases. So I'm doing something right in teaching this next generation of civil rights attorneys, because you know, Lori, Robin, Drew, and we're going to get tired, and Lacey, we're going to get tired. So we need somebody to take the mantle. And he called and asked me to co-counsel a case with him. And so it's just a great honor to see, you know, that students are interested in it. The last thing I'll say, because I know I just saw somebody say my name in there, I did have the honor of serving as the 80th president of the National Bar Association. So I would be remiss if I did not mention that while I'm here speaking for the ABA, as the NBA celebrates its 100 years of existence.
Juanita, thank you for sharing. Thank you for all that you do. We are just in such good company here. I don't know how we're going to get through all of this, but Drew, please share your story and how this came about for you as well.
Well, you know, Lily Tomlin once said, you know, I always wanted to be somebody, but now I realize I should have been more specific. I should say, though, that my own career was really more man or woman plans and God laughs, and became a kind of a walking tour of the civil rights and public interest bar, because I came out of law school with the very first real wave of women in 1971, and basically bolted to San Francisco from the East Coast, and ended up, my first job was in a small left-wing Oakland firm where we represented primarily war resistors and Black Panthers and people in Oakland who really couldn't afford a lawyer. I went from there, because I was laid off along with everybody else in the firm, to that's the woman plans part, to the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, where I specialized in tri-ethnic school and employment cases. My main case being the Uvalde school case, filed in 1972 and settled in 2008. And so it didn't surprise me when the Uvalde thing just exploded. I went from there to be a professor, ultimately tenured, and then following massive layoffs from the law school, went to the best civil rights job in the world, to be the head of the Bar Association of San Francisco, the same person who made my life a living hell when I was a litigator of class actions. Suddenly it was, Drew, can I get you that $10,000 this afternoon, or do you need it this morning? So it was very extraordinary, really. I later served as the head of the National Association of Women Judges, and ultimately as a law school dean. Early on, largely through happenstance, like a woman in a dress store, I became the founding provisional second vice president of California Women Lawyers. Now, how many people can say that? Anyhow, I later, really kind of earlier in my career, became the first woman chair of the ACLU of Northern California. and chair of the San Francisco Commission on the Status of Women. You might say my mantra was, as Tina Fey advises, say yes, and you'll figure it out later. So I thought that I would close these brief remarks with a quote from Marian Wright Edelman that I think expresses what we've all been trying to say here today, and what no doubt everybody who is participating as a viewer would say. She said, "The biggest lessons I learned in Mississippi in the 60s were about the strength and resiliency of the human spirit and the ability of determined people to resist and overcome injustice through personal and collective will."
Listen, ladies, I am absolutely blown away by the depth and breadth of talent that is here on this call. I almost feel like a little bit of an imposter because I am someone who does not traditionally practice civil rights and social justice. I am a tax attorney by background, but I will tell you, I'm just passionate about. I used to say a few things, but the reality is I'm passionate about a lot of things. And I have figured out a unique way to remain in corporate America, but still lend my time, talent, and treasures to the issues that are most impactful to me. And so I just absolutely admire your journeys. My story started way back when I was actually in undergrad school. You know, I was very in tune with community service and making things that had an impact to my community. And I didn't know at the time that that volunteerism, that work, would really be the springboard. So when I did get to law school, I continued to equip myself with a bunch of skills. Like I learned how to negotiate, I learned how to understand and digest the rule of law. I understood what were the fundamental rights that everyone should enjoy, and that passion just continued to kind of spiral. And so I found myself volunteering with my sorority to write resolutions to impact legislative change. I found myself volunteering with VITA through tax law clinics, et cetera, to help low income individuals. And so I like to say that you know, I'm a practicing tax attorney, but I moonlight as a civil rights and social justice advocate and crusader. And I don't mind putting my cape on because I think these are the issues, and we need more people who are passionate about them, like you and I are, to continue to fight the good fight and forge ahead. And we have said so much today, y'all. I'm so excited. I want to go in so many different directions. You all each talked about so many different diverse practice areas. And I know sometimes people think of civil rights as just only the mainstream, right? Like racial profiling, advancing LGBT rights, protecting the right of vote and voter suppression. But the reality of it is, this is a widely expansive and diverse area of practice, and there's so much intersectionality here. Um, Lori, can you talk about how civil rights law covers a wide range of practice area, and how do you navigate that intersectionality of issues like race, gender, disability, and immigration in your work?
Sure. Yeah, I think that we talked about all different practice areas, and one thing that's common to everyone is that we represent, whether it's a class action or an individual, we represent a person who is a human person living a whole life, right? And so they have a bunch of different identities and a bunch of different issues that they face, right? And so one of the cases that I worked on was on behalf of a transgender woman in Idaho prison who was being denied appropriate medical care, who was a Native American woman who grew up on a reservation in Idaho. Right in that, you've got a bunch of cross-section of different kinds of issues that overlap. And her story is a story of all of her identities and the way she was treated as a result of that combination of identities and the combination of prejudices that we have. And so when you look at that, I think it's a good example to me, because some people who might practice in one area of civil rights or another might look at that and say, it's not the right case for me for various reasons. And I think one of the things that there's a growing awareness of is to understand how intersectionality matters and how we want to present it in the law. The law historically has really tried to kind of put everything in silos. You have race discrimination over here and sex discrimination over here. And we have a choice as attorneys how we present that. And so looking at our clients, trying to understand the wholeness of our clients, and also it also applies to the lawyers as we practice, right? Because we also appear as our whole selves, and happily the law has become a more diverse field, and it still needs to be improve retention. And so it's the combination of those things. I would just say one of the biggest pieces of advice I have, and the thing that I've learned over 20 years of practice, is that lawyers, we don't like to admit if we don't know something. That's like early in our careers, especially, it's like the cardinal sin. You don't want to say, I don't know. But in terms of understanding intersectionality and the different ways that different systemic oppression can be affecting our clients and can play out, I think having the willingness to admit when we don't know something, and even more, the humility to learn from that situation, I think allows us to better represent our communities and to better attack the systems of oppression, which are not limited to just one axis, right? And of course, we're seeing that play out now. And so I think there are lots of people, important organizations who specialize and become experts in one aspect of civil rights law, and that's needed. And we also need to be in community, figuring out how can we resist as a whole and try and expand civil rights for everyone.
I love that. That is spot on. The intersectionality is, I think, is an area where how really people can get involved because the issues are so intertwined and they overlap so much. Y'all, I have so many questions here. Let me see if I can do this. So, I know the burning question is, and all of you here have really full-time practices. I'm probably the only person that kind of moonlights in between and does something on a part-time basis or pro bono. But for those individuals who have time and are trying to, make their introduction into this area, Drew, I think I'll kick this one over to you. What are your thoughts on, how you can leverage the role of pro bono work or other leadership roles in advancing civil rights? And what are kind of some of the challenges alongside of balancing those responsibilities?
Well, it turns out, once you have a law degree, you're a leader. Once you're in law school, you're really a leader. And my favorite quote about leadership is that a leader is a dealer in hope. And who said that? Napoleon, of all people. But I feel very strongly that you really can always find ways outside of whatever your job is to do something about social justice. And a lot of my advice is, no matter what you're in, join boards, even if you're too young or inexperienced. Become involved in city commissions and things like that. It never occurred to me that the San Francisco bar would be a civil rights job. But in fact, it turned out that the longtime vice chair of the ACLU was the incoming president of the San Francisco bar. And so when I was laid off from the law job, the professor job, suddenly there it was, the fix was in. And that kind of a job allows you to address things like intersectionality. We started out very early on in about late 1980s, basically having 4 subcommittees of an equality committee. So it was women, it was people of color, it was LGBTQ, and it was disability rights. And then we had a president, and each had 2 co-chairs in the overall committee. But we then had a president, Ray Marshall, who later became president of the State Bar of California, an African-American partner at a big firm, who basically did this big diversity ball where we brought everyone together. And after that, we really tried as much as possible to learn from other people who had different experiences and to get money from big firms to address specific problems. So I think that my advice is that to really whatever it is you're experiencing, you can always have an impact pulling together diverse groups and moving money over from these people who run big firms who, basically, if you make them feel that you can acquit them of their public service and civil rights responsibilities, which they would do if they only had the time, it's just no limit to the amount of pro bono time and money that they will move over to you, particularly if you're in a job like a bar association, a city bar association, which on the surface of it looks neutral, but we were anything but. So I think you can take any job, as you were saying, Lacey, and as Ms. Baker was saying, you can and make it into a job that at least in part helps to achieve social justice.
You know what, Drew, spot on. I love that. I think that's how I've been able to continue to navigate, right? And it's one of the reasons why I continue to work and do my day-to-day in corporate America, because there are some companies out there who value this type of work and they're willing to loan their talent, right? Their team members in their law departments. They're willing to put money behind these resources. And give people an opportunity. And I always think, I know for me, coming up through law school, I had a law professor who was so in tune with these issues. He would give us a teaser and give us extra credit, right? If we did some of these activities. And, hindsight is 2020. He had really planted a seed in us to do this type of advocacy work. And it's something that has stuck with me to this day. And so I truly believe that it is great if you can go out there and do this full time or even part time, but pro bono and just volunteerism and leadership is just an easy way to get involved. Particularly, I encourage law students to get involved now. I love to speak to the different demographics that we have here. If you're a retired seasoned attorney, it's just a great way to continue to give back. And I think it also helps sharpen your skill set. And it stretches you a little bit. I've certainly taken on things that I was like, you know what, I probably need to phone a friend. And I'm so glad I know enough people to help me get there. But that's really the beauty of it. And now I feel confident and competent to do those things alone. And so it's just a great way to continue to navigate things. Y'all, let me remind everybody, I see some questions popping up in chat. If you have specific questions, if you can please put them in the Q&A feature. We're going to try to weave some of these in. I will tell you that we will not have enough time to get to all of your questions, but we are taking note of them and we're going to figure out a way how to get you information that you need. And so I want to pivot next to, and we've talked about some of the challenges along the way, but Lanita and Lori, if you want to add some more to this, I want to talk about what are some of the significant challenges that you faced in your work as a civil rights lawyer, and how do you overcome them? This work is not easy, but it's very rewarding. So how do you navigate that space?
I would say right now the biggest challenge is our political landscape. We've made so many strides. We've made strides. I'll take off the so many. We've made strides over the years, and the very fact that those strides are at risk right now. And I talked about the consent decree, when I first talked about here in Louisville, Kentucky. If you look at that 125 pages of the patterns and practices findings from the Department of Justice, we have a huge problem here. But because of the political landscape, because there was a change in administrations, that consent decree it won't be enforced. Like it won't be. And so in the political landscape, when we're told we have these tools, we do have the Civil Rights Act. Consent decrees is supposed to be a political tool that our communities can rely on to protect their civil rights. That is a huge challenge. I think about so much work and one of my civil rights idols, Kristen Clark, did within 4 years, like uncomparable. But when we think about the work, that, and I'm going to name ladies because we have a panel full of ladies here, and it is Women's History Month. Cheryl Eiffel, when she was over Legal Defense Fund, when you look at the work that our forefathers, like our foremothers have done. And I'm going to say that too. And I give credit to the women, because so many times when we're looking at the media, you don't see these ladies. You don't see Kristen Clark on the media all the time. But even before she was with the Department of Justice, she was doing great work at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under the law. You know, every once in a while, when it's a case that makes the media, you will see them. But they do so much impactful work, impactful litigation, that they deserve their flowers. And so one, just being a woman and having to fight to be respected in this civil rights space, that is a challenge. But I go back to the political landscape, the strides that we're making are at risk. And sometimes I do get discouraged, because it appears that no matter what we say that, like, politics do impact this. Like, people are so disgusted with politics, I will say, that they're like, well, voting doesn't matter, or I'm not going to do this. I'm like, but you can't say you care about this, or you can't really expect long-term change if we don't vote. Like, yes, it's unfortunate that sometimes we do end up in a lesser of two evils, but we have to go with the lesser of the evils, like, to continue to make strides. But I say that also to use it as a motivation to know that we have to continue to put people in places that can legislate change, because we can have these cases all day long, but so long as we have things that are open to interpretation with courts, we never know what we're going to get. And Ninth Circuit's going to be different from Sixth Circuit's going to be different from 11th Circuit. And then who knows right now, I don't know a civil rights attorney that's not afraid to take something actually up to the Supreme Court right now. Like, you're like, who do we? What do we not feel? Simply because you don't want to create bad law, God forbid. But then you do want certain questions to be settled. And so that is a big challenge, if I'm being honest. And Lori, if you want to add to, I took over moderating a little bit, Lacey. I'm sorry.
No, I echo everything you just said, Lanita. I think that from a different angle too, and talking about the personal challenges, I think you know, I think we need to say too, especially for our law students listening and younger folks coming up, that within the practice of civil rights, you still have all the biases that are in society and in our legal field. And so navigating that, as a queer person, as a woman, navigating courts, navigating opposing counsel, navigating co-counsel, those are challenges, because sometimes we suffer from the misimpression that because we're in a public interest field or we're among social justice lawyers, that we're not struggling with those biases. And I think that we can always do better, right, at improving our own field, because in order to do the best representation of our clients, who, as I talked about before, represent all walks of life, we need to have better representation. And so I think one thing Lanita was saying, right, these people who came before us, and there's people who were dismissed before us, right, like Lonnie Guinier, when she was nominated to be at DOJ, who didn't get the job, Anita Hill, right? We also stand on the shoulders of them. And if only they were, confirmed and listened to. And I think it's so important in doing civil rights. Like, it cannot be said enough that we need to get more people in the profession and keep people in the profession. And so I think that's really important. And one of the things I'm lucky to do now is do training and kind of influence, I hope, the culture of the way we practice law, including in public interest law. So I think there's both aspects there. There's the external challenges that we face, which, wow, we've got a lot. And then trying to make sure that we have as few internal challenges as possible, because it takes all of our spirit and energy to face those external challenges. And it's sure easier when we feel supported inside the profession.
Laura, you could not have queued this next topic up better than that, because Robin, I'm coming to you. Listen, the work that we do, we know it's impactful, but we have to be realistic, particularly in this climate. Civil rights work can often be emotionally and mentally taxing. I know for me personally, I suffer from compassion fatigue, right? Especially when the people, the groups that you're helping, um, I'm not too far removed from them, right? So in many ways, I'm still a marginalized individual. I am someone who wants to be an advocate and speak for marginalized communities. And so compassion fatigue is real. And so I would love for you to talk about how do you manage that emotional burden of advocating for others, and what strategies do you use to really maintain that resilience in order to forge ahead?
Sure, no, thank you. I had a professor in law school, and he would talk about how lawyers are social engineers, and part of that is very stressful, and it's learning how to understand. Really, I would say the best thing to do is to start looking and understanding trauma and your nervous system, and developing some sort of personal practice and community-based practices around this. Because when I started doing this work in holistic health, I was really focused on the most, vulnerable and marginalized populations. But what ended up happening, the demand for mental health support and trauma-informed care services came from those people that were actually doing the work to support a lot of those vulnerable populations. So lawyers, civil rights leaders, elected officials, nonprofit world agencies, political staff. So those were a lot of my initial clients. And issues around stress, lack of sleep, substance abuse, dealing with loss and grief, and even just work-life balance, all of that really increased during and after the pandemic and the quarantine. And when we're working with trauma, and the definition of trauma, it's a stuckness in your nervous system. And it's anytime that your nervous system experiences something too soon, too fast, or not enough, the nervous system starts to go into fight, flight, freeze. And we need that protective mechanism in our nervous system for, when things happen and you do have to, like, if you have a big case or, whatever it is, you do want your nervous system to be able to function and protect, but you don't want to stay stuck in that fight, flight, freeze state. And so, so that stuckness is unique to each person, and it's about nervous system regulation. So this is not logical. Like, this is not logical. This is not intellectual. This is your nervous system and what's happening in your body, because your body and your nervous system does not always know the difference. Like if you watch a movie and you experience something, it's just a movie, but your nervous system does not, and the body, it reacts. And so it's through working and understanding your nervous system, how to regulate it. And that can be done through breath work, through movement, somatics, writing, journaling, meditation. All of these things helps to regulate your nervous system, and making certain lifestyle changes, and just understanding how to build community around this, because that's going to be extremely important now. A lot of people feel isolated out there. And so really understanding how to manage your nervous system regulation, understanding when you go out of balance, what you need to do to come back into balance. That's a lot of the work that I do now. And it's an individual and communal work that you can, we can do together.
Oh, Robin, you're getting us all the way together. I know the section we're working on a trauma-informed law practice, and I needed to hear that, right? We need to make sure that I always say that if I'm not good, I can't be of good to anybody else. And so that is something that we have to continue to keep at the forefront. I know we have people on this call who are not lawyers that are trying to figure out how to get involved and how to add to the ranks and be an advocate. And I would say to that is that a lot of the work that we do, we actually depend on those volunteers who may not have the legal background to be able to help us, to give us real-time information as to what's going on in the community. Sometimes we can be so laser focused on just the law portion of it. There's many other aspects in volunteerism, things that you can do in order to be involved. And there's just a laundry list of things that are there. One of the things that I wanted to go to you and talk about next is Robin quickly got us together around how to maintain ourselves going forward. one of the things that kind of keeps me going, right, is really when I see the end result, the wins. And sometimes they're not big, grandiose wins, right? They're little small wins. It's making an impact in just a community. It may be doing something at a local level. It may be doing something for one individual, helping them get some benefits that was denied based on some quick counsel. It may be helping some kids do something at a school versus a big national win. And certainly all of those things along the spectrum have their place, and it's very rewarding because I do believe that the small collective things eventually bubble up to be great big things, and change anywhere is change for good in this area. But let's talk about the rewarding aspects of this work. What aspects of civil rights and social justice lawyering have been the most rewarding to you personally and professionally? And how do these rewards, these wins, sustain your commitment to continue to do this type of work?
I think the greatest reward for me is seeing exactly what you're saying, seeing how my work impacts my clients and the community, like my local community and the community at large. To know that, to see where, now Brianna's mom is, when I first met her, no, I don't want to do any interviews, and we're approaching the 5-year mark of when Brianna was murdered in 6 days, 6 days. And so to know that people are calling her now and she's like, yes, I will talk. And she has that comfort of going to the Department of Justice and talking to the heads of people there. She has she's quite comfortable going, to annual legislative conference, the Congressional Black Caucus annual legislative conference, and speaking on a panel there. And how do you turn tragedy into triumph and change for so many places? So to be able to, she didn't know anything about all of this to begin. So to be able to help her along the way to, here is the impact and where we want to make change. And so to see that, to see students, and like you said, I'm over here following the little chat and listening and doing, I'm like, my senses are all over the place right now. But when I see so many students that are interested, we know that they are interested because of so many recent civil rights issues that have arose. So to be a part of that is rewarding, to build that future, to make other people feel and a sense of obligation to make change. That is the most rewarding aspect. And to I always say I pride myself on educating the community. So whenever I'm on the media, I make sure like they can ask me a question, but I'm making sure that I'm letting them know, oh, and like I let people know, like, because one of the frustrating things is if you're at when I would be at a protest and they'd be like calling for the mayor to arrest the cops, and I'm like, no. So I'm like, the mayor can't arrest anybody. So like changing it to prosecutor, and which prosecutor, that state level prosecutor, or the local level prosecutor, state level prosecutor, or the federal prosecutors. And just, so I always, anytime I can, take an opportunity to let the community know what they're not completely understanding about our system, I do that. And that's so rewarding when I see them pick up. So I see the signs change. I see them going after. I see them taking out elected officials that have been sitting comfy because they haven't been doing their job, but like, oh no, we're holding you accountable now. So when I see that type of community mobility, that's the rewarding part for me.
I love that. Again, just perfect for the next question that kind of popped up for me. And Drew, I'm coming to you because I think something that Juanita said really resonated with me in terms of the education component of it and the obligation that we have to educate the general public and make sure that they're well informed and we're bringing them along the curve too. And I think that empowers people then to go back to their respective communities and empower them because they know more, they learn more. But Drew, I want to turn that slightly and let's talk about mentorship, like the responsibility of bringing people, lifting as you climb. What are your thoughts on that? And how can we really bring in this next generation of lawyers and just community advocates And what does that responsibility look like, particularly in the area of public interest law?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. Well, the most rewarding part of, for example, the Bar Association job was we could do a tremendous amount of public education and extend those programs to be duplicated, replicated nationally by town hall meetings, by a whole series of mechanisms where we opened up sort of the law to the public. But the most rewarding part of that job was being able to, as they say these days, lift up people from marginalized or help communities by mentorship and by providing the kind of support that a lot of people do not get otherwise. And so, for example, uh, I would have a managing partner call me and say, I have this lawyer, a person of color in the firm, and I want them to really rise quickly through the legal system. And I can, at that point, I could put them on the most prestigious bar committee. I could recruit them to do pro bono work that was high visibility. And similarly, when there was in a group of a woman came to me a woman of color who had been asked in an interview by a big firm. She was African American. If you could be any color, what color would you be? And she had demanded a apology, didn't get it. So I called the managing partner of that firm, a huge law firm, and said, look, if I'm hearing about this, it's going to be on the front page of the Chronicle, and you've got to do something about this right away in terms of training of your people and so on, so that women like this student are not exposed to this. But I also said, we're making a big film at the bar on how to achieve diversity both in your law firm and among your clientele and so on. And you all didn't want to contribute, but won't you want to say that you just gave the bar $10,000 for that film to show, to demonstrate that you really do have an interest in this? And so, the ability to actually, because you can't, it's much more difficult within a firm or within a corporation to sort of shake the tree. Whereas when you have the kind of job I had, you can just kind of do, really stand for and on behalf of other people. And I wanted to say also that just extending kindness and bringing up the people behind you and mentoring them, just, it makes you feel good, and it can be tremendously important to people. And my mother was a medical school professor and a national feminist speaker and a wise woman. And she once said, if I could leave you with any advice, it would be to speak words of caring, not only to those closest to you, but to all the hungry ears you encounter on your journey through a sometimes cold world. Stop on that mountain climb to bring along those less agile, less well-endowed necessarily. It would make the view even more beautiful when you get to the top. And I think it's that kind of service both within our communities and within our profession and reaching out beyond that. I did have one quote about men versus women, incidentally, that I've always loved. A man has to be an axe murderer to be called ruthless. All a woman has to do is put you on hold.
Drew, you are a riot, and I absolutely love it. I know our time is getting short here, and I see tons of questions in the Q&A feature. I also see tons of comments in the chat. I do know staff is working behind the scenes to triage all of that. We won't have time to get through all of those questions today, but we're going to try to be a resource to you the best we can. We will have to partner with some of our other esteemed colleagues in this area to make sure that we can get you what you need. But I would be remiss if we did not try to round out this with some next steps, have you, in terms of specific advice for those of you who are trying to get into this area, new advocates, or pivot your current practice or add to your practice. And so I want to throw this out to each of our panelists, and I will start with you, Robin. Well, I will start with you, Robin, in terms of what do you think the future of civil rights lawyering looks like? And then what I'd like to do is kind of round it out with our round robin of what advice would each of you give for new advocates in terms of, how should they be positioning themselves? What are some of the small things that they can do? I really believe you have to meet people where they are. And so everyone won't have all day, right, to have a practice dedicated to this. But as a law student, what could I do? As someone who's not even a practitioner, right? I'm just a community advocate that I'm passionate about this. What can I stop and do right now that will be helpful to you who is a practitioner and be able to go forward? So, Robin, I'm going to kick it to you first. What does the future of civil rights lawyering look like? What are the most important issues and areas that need attention right now? And I'll be candid with you, that's probably an unfair question because given the current landscape, everything is on fire, but I want to hear your thoughts on that specific area.
Yeah, it's like take your pick. But I'll say this, after I've lived in I lived in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm not originally from there, from Chicago, but I lived there for about 11 years and just returned back, moved back to Illinois. But voter protection, it's huge, because you can have, the best candidate, issues, all of this and that, and plans and for the future, but if people do not have access to the ballot and if it's not a monitored and fair process, all of that other stuff doesn't even matter. But just from what my experience in Georgia, just people being able to register, stay on the rolls, not have their votes challenged, having their vote counted and protected. If there's more challenges and recounts, that's going to be just one of the most important issues, in addition to the trauma-informed policy and programs and community building.
Thank you so much for that, Robin. And let's just move to our kind of our final question here. I want to give each of you the opportunity to kind of share some parting thoughts about how people can get involved. In full disclosure, I think you've seen it in the comments. If you've been trying to navigate, there are people from all walks of life here at all different stages trying to figure out how they can do something. I think right now everybody feels this overwhelming urge. We see things are not the way they should be. We see progress being intentionally dismantled and walked back. What are your thoughts on what people can do? Drew, I'll start with you, and then I'll go over to you, Lori, Robin, and then we'll round out with Lanita.
Well, it gets back to my view that the minute you enter law school, you're a leader. And I think it is very important to assert that leadership, to work, volunteer for organizations like the Impact Fund and others that are represented here, to take courses in law school that are on litigation and civil rights. Most law schools have clinics, to work in clinics like that expose you to really first-class lawyering, both within and without the law schools. And then I know that this is a bizarre thing to say, but take accounting. An awful lot of people are going to end up, think of yourself as what should I do to end up the executive director of the best civil rights organization in the United States? Take accounting. But it is really important to know that you're a leader and to have the responsibility to use that leadership, whether you're a first-year student or a 20-year lawyer. And I think that the other thing is that when I first came out of law school, there were so few women that we all kind of knew each other and supported each other. And in a funny sort of way, there's so many women and people of color, well, not nearly as many as there should be, in leadership roles, that in a way it's more lonely because there's just so many. When there are a few, there's just this cohesiveness. And I think it is really important to support each other and to start new projects together that deal with what we're dealing with right now. And law professors and deans and so on can do an awful lot to help steer people into those directions. And never think that anything you do, no matter how little, isn't in fact extremely important, especially in these times. And I did want to quote one last quote from me is Molly Ivins, who basically said, I prefer, for these troubled times, I prefer people who wrap themselves in the flag by doing the kind of work we do, rather than people who are destructive and wrap themselves in the flag. So I think, anything you can do, no matter how small, can end up being very much a part of a larger effort forward, which really has to happen from all of us right now.
Thank you so much for that, Drew. Y'all, I know I promised everybody I would give you an opportunity to make some closing remarks. We are going to be so short on time here. So, Lori, Robin, Lanita, I'm still going to give you the opportunity. If we can keep it tight, I would appreciate it.
Sure. I think one of the things I'd say, especially this large group, is that people often focus when people go to law school, you hear about the ACLU, you see the big names of the organizations in the news. And the reality is there aren't that many jobs. And right now, federal funding is going away. That supports lots of public interest jobs. And there are lots of other ways, like Drew said, as a lawyer, you're a leader. And there are lots of other ways to be active and focusing on your community. So, for example, National Lawyers Guild, they are people who have chapters all over and who go out and protect people's rights to demonstrate. They train people on rights, including, immigrants' rights. So the issues of the day, there are ways to be involved regardless of whether it's your full-time job or not. There is an opportunity to go, not just sort of volunteer, right? Like this broad thing, but actually protect people's rights on the ground, make a difference, get involved either in your community if you're part of a community that's vulnerable and subject to attack, or other communities if you are privileged enough to be fairly safe, right? And so the other thing I would say is that we have seen the way, especially now, that corporations, big law firms, have power to speak on civil rights or not, are being attacked or not. And so if you are part of that, it is right now, big law firms are walking back from pro bono. They're walking back from being involved in civil rights cases because they're being attacked by the administration. So if that's your path, then you have a responsibility and opportunity to speak up and not be intimidated by that. And that's one of the ways that you can help support the civil rights community at large. So I think, again, wherever you are, there is an opportunity to be vocal and supportive of civil rights.
Thank you. Robin?
I would say if you're not a lawyer or if you're in law school, definitely if you're in law school, so much of your legal career really begins at that moment. So getting as much experience as you can with jobs, summer opportunities, joining organizations, networking, all of those things are so important at that time. And it'll give you a clear idea of like what you do and don't want to do, once you are out in the legal field. And then I would say too, just going back to understanding trauma-informed care practices. And so when I'm talking about it, specifically, policy is great, frameworks are great, but I'm talking about your nervous system. You have to start with your nervous system because, you can plan and do all these other things, but if you're dysregulated, it's like you're on this like hamster wheel. But once you kind of understand, more about how to regulate yourself, and it does teach you how to build compassion and empathy for you, that radiates out to others. And going back to what Drusilla said, that makes space in your nervous system. When you make space, that's when you can do more and you can focus on kindness because you're being kind to yourself. That is so important right now because otherwise, people get burnt out, even if they want to help, even if they have all the resources to be able to do something, but it's really about, regulating your nervous system, and it's unique to each person.
Thank you, Robin. Lanita, and then I will give some closing remarks. Thank you so much.
I'll talk fast. I think that first is recognizing that civil rights and social justice carry so many topics. It's education, housing, voting, criminal justice, immigration, financial, jobs, so many things. So if you're interested in getting into this area, my recommendation is to pick an area. You can't be an expert at all, and civil rights practice is hard. They fight them. The litigation is very drawn out. So it's not as glamorous as it looks when it's on TV. So pick an area. find a mentor, but most of all, we have to fight back. We just have to.
Lanita, thank you for that. Our panelists have been amazing. I will close this out by saying, for those non-lawyers out there, there's so much work that you can do. You can go to your city hall meetings, right? Your city council meetings, go to your state legislators, understand what policy is being put up, share relevant information, share accurate information on social media, right? There are some think tanks out there, some organization who is working hard to share accurate information. Share that with people, show up for people where they are. As volunteers, people may need emotional support. They may need access to job applications. They may need help, with various different things. And so do all of these organizations who are in the fight, trying to make sure that they continue to protect their rights. Sign up to be an information carrier. Sign up to go out into the community to get the information so that organizations will know firsthand what is going on. Listen, I hope that this panel has been informative for you. There's so much more content that we have to go through. I am going to encourage you, first of all, thank you for joining this free session. I'd like to express our gratitude to this esteemed group of panelists. You all are doing such important work, and we thank you for taking time out of your schedule to share your experiences. I have a feeling that our guests want to know more about you and what you do. I will tell you that the Section of Civil Rights and Social Justice provides free webinars and resources for legal professionals and advocates nationwide. We hope that this helps you in your work. And again, if you can please consider joining, becoming an active member of the ABA, donating to our sessions, but most importantly, don't go anywhere today. We hope that you will stay for our next panel, which is taking on civil rights cases as an attorney volunteer, demystifying the journey, which will start at approximately 12:15 Eastern Standard Time and is accessible from the event lobby. Thank you all so much. We are going to do our best to synthesize the additional questions that are out there and get you some additional information. Again, thank you so much, and stay tuned for the remainder of the Civil Rights Bootcamp. And I hope to see you back again next Friday on the 14th for the continuation. Thank you.